inviting us, Dara. Don't say anything bad about Dara. My name is Noelani McGadden, and I am the Vice President of Business Development from PlumChoice. And flew in today here from Boston. Our offices are in Boston by way of Cincinnati. We had a meeting with a customer in Cincinnati, but we're going to talk to you a lot about how services is an important aspect of the Internet of Things. And maybe you can introduce yourself too.
Okay, my name is Kenny Light. I'm a product manager, so I've been building products for years, software, hardware, service products, able to complement what Noelani has to say.
Yeah, and it's really important to have Channing here, not only because he has a lot of the technological background, but because he's an MIT graduate, and I think there's going to be a little bit of some dissing going on between the two schools. We're here today to talk to you about services in the age of the Internet of Things. And we went online and took a look at what you guys are doing here at the Innovation Institute. And how many of you here have a slant towards design, product design? Show of hands. Quite a few. How about engineering, platform, software, applications? Right? A little bit less. How about business? 2 or 3? All right. Yeah. How many of you are here because you're thinking about services? Great, great. You're going to be ahead of the class here. So, we come to you because we want to ask you the provocative question, who is going to support the Internet of Things? There are billions and billions of things out there in the market. And if you've read all the studies by Ericsson and T-Mobile and Verizon and Nokia, they say, billions and billions of things. Well, we're here today to tell you that it's not the Internet of Things that's important right now. It's the Internet of Services. Consumers are looking to have long-term relationships with developers, designers, and business and companies who are giving them products. They're not thinking about that product as a one-time, one and done. They're thinking of a long-term relationship. And as engineers, designers, and developers, you have to think about the customer experience from the very beginning. You must start with that when you're looking at putting your product out there, not just from a usage, but from a pricing perspective. What's it going to cost you to put that product in the market if you're not just delivering it once, but you're delivering a solution over the lifetime of that service? To give you a little bit of some idea here, these are some metrics that we have gathered from the market, from our own studies as well, around what consumers how they're experiencing Internet of Things products in their home. And the first thing up there on the top is 70% of IoT products are returned in perfect working order. That means a consumer went to the store, they said, wow, this is really cool, I want to buy this. I want to put this in my home. And then they came home and they tried to put it into place, make their lights turn on or interact with Google Home or Alexa, and they couldn't figure it out. We here are probably not a good sample base of people who are using this product. You're very technically savvy. I'm pretty technically savvy. My mom is not very technically savvy. She's going to need help putting that product in home where we say, oh, I want to be able to understand when my mom comes home, when she turns on the light, when she uses her products and services, and I want to be able to understand that data off of the internet in the cloud. Well, my mother is not going to figure out how to connect those components into the internet. And so consumers are buying these products and then they're returning them. That's a really important factor to you as a designer and a developer. You get your product out there, someone buys it, you go to all that effort to get it into the market, and then the consumer returns it because they couldn't figure out how to connect it, or they couldn't figure out how to use the features that were associated with this product that you thought, this is the coolest thing I've ever created and I want someone to use it. And they're like, well, it said that I could do this, but I can't figure out how to do it now. The other metric that's up there is that when consumers have trouble connecting their product to the internet or figuring out how to utilize that feature, and they can't figure it out, 51% of them would not buy from that brand again. Again, half of your consumers gone, not coming back, because they couldn't figure out how to do this great thing that you thought your product was going to solve. So PlumChoice, our company, did a study. We've produced results for the last 2 years, and we'd love to have you guys come up and take a copy. We have samples here, or the actual study. And we determined that 2016 was the year of the smart device because we had double-digit growth in consumers putting IoT products into their home. I think what's really important for you to think about when you're putting your product either in the home or out there in the smart city or in your market is what's the context from a consumer's perspective. And what we thought was really interesting is we went to the market and we found two products out there. Look different to you guys? Two light bulbs. Anybody have any idea what's the difference between this one and this one?
Smarter. One's probably more expensive.
$5.99, $49.99. Okay, if you look on the back, you've got an app that's connecting. All right, so you've got the tail of two light bulbs here. $5.99, $49.99. If you're a consumer, which one are you going to buy? Kind of, if you're looking for, I got 100 light bulbs I got to put in my home, versus, all right, I can connect it to my phone, and it's really cool, and I can turn it on from my phone. I can turn it on when I'm coming down my driveway, and I can come home to a light home instead of a dark home. But you have to think about the overall customer experience. So, why are they going to buy a $49.99 light bulb? You have to think about the price associated in the customer experience and what the customer is considering when they're going to buy that product from you. And while I would contend, I'm going to ask Channing to chime in as well, I would contend that right now we're in the age of, okay, $5.99 is probably good enough for me. I think there are some really compelling reasons to think about how you can get this into your market with your consumer.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the two bulbs, they both accomplish the same thing. They give you light, right? They give you light. So if somebody's looking for light, easy choice. How do you convince them that that extra is worth it, especially when you got a lot to replace? We're just getting past the point of taking incandescent bulbs, going to these things that have these curly cues, right? And then to LED light bulbs because it delivered the promise of saving energy. That's easy to understand. This is a little more difficult to understand. So as you build your products, be thinking about that frame of mind that your customer's going to have.
And a lot of times when consumers are faced with that choice, simplicity, convenience, and control, you have to help them get over the hump of purchasing and making that big jump for 10 times the price. What's going to be that key component? And a lot of times what we found with our partners is that service is one of those compelling factors that will get the consumer, okay, well, I get unlimited service to help me if I have any problems. And again, if you take a look at our report, we found that consumers are befuddled by IoT devices in their home. It's some pretty strong statements about consumers just simply not being able to figure it all out. Because they don't just buy a light bulb. They want to buy a home system. They want to connect it all up to Google Home, to Alexa. They want to use voice control. Well, it takes a while. You've got to spend a couple of hours getting that thing set up, or I can call up someone and they can help me set it all up. So a couple things to think about, about that relationship that you have with the consumer. You have a one-time, one-and-done product. You've got a lifetime relationship with the product, with the consumer. And a lot of times when innovators, designers, and engineers are building products, they don't think about what it means to have constant interaction, constant data, constant information about how your consumer is using it, and feedback. You have feedback from the consumer almost instantaneously. I don't like that. That app is not user-friendly. I can't figure that out. Where do I go now? Give me an outlet to call someone if I can't figure it out, or if I just want to give you feedback that I don't like the way your app works. So I think the takeaway from this slide is that consumers are no longer interested in just buying that one-and-done product. They want this. They want the lifetime service and relationship with you. But then you need to be prepared as a designer, developer, and innovator to understand that lifetime relationship. And I think I just read some information. There was a publication, I think it was on Forbes this morning or yesterday morning, that said by 2021, the data associated with your car will be more valuable than the car itself. So If you own that data as an IoT developer, it's going to be very valuable for you to monetize. Anything else you wanted to add on this, Channing?
Yeah, just to add to Noelani's comments about that, and please, you guys are welcome to talk to us too. We want to talk to you as well. This simple bulb, like I said, turns on the lights. But if you look at use cases, why do people want to use a smartphone to turn on their lights? We can walk over to the wall, right? Click the switch.
I mean, it's easier if you can just sit in one place and kind of control your environment from that position.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds good, but it's interesting you say that, because one of the most common use cases and value propositions that people say when you say, why did you buy that light? Or the switch that you can turn on and off with your phone, it's because I don't want to get out of bed because the light switch is on the other side of the room. But in general, it's things like that.
What about vacations?
Yeah, vacation homes, absolutely. Or, let's say when it's daylight savings time, it's dark really soon. You don't want to come home and have to turn on all the lights, but you've got a phone that has geofencing capabilities, right? When you get within, I don't know, a mile of your home or whatever, it can turn on all the lights, or it can turn up your heat so that it's nice and warm when you get home. So those are the types of things that are services that are on top of this. And over the lifetime of this device, those are the things you have to be thinking about, the ways to add value to your product. Okay? It's not just about the product you sell today.
And we're here today to ask you to think about what do you want the consumer, the desired outcome of the consumer, when you're interacting with them? What do you want that outcome to be? What do you want the consumer to think about? And you could be trying to drive more revenue. You want the consumer to buy, another light bulb, more light bulbs, 10 light bulbs, and you have like a tiered discount across all your light bulbs. So when they buy one, you can have metadata say, I see you have 3 in your home. We have a special going on. If you add 10 more, we'll upgrade you to the next level of the app. Or there's other ways that you can drive revenue with the consumer. Reducing costs. Are your consumers thinking about reducing costs? Geofencing around the home. We talk about thermostats. Well, if your consumers know that when the last person has left the home, the thermostat will automatically turn down or turn up depending on the temperature. They don't have to think about this. The consumer doesn't have to think about it and program it. It's actually designed into your product. Any iPhone that's connected to the thermostat will automatically detect if it's outside of a geofence, the thermostat changes. These are things that are really compelling to consumers. Risk mitigation. A lot of insurance companies are getting into IoT right now because you've got water, moisture, fire, and they want to be able to understand immediately what's happening with the home, with the office, with the smart office, so that they can detect that issue and respond to it quicker. Reduce costs, reduce risk.
Yeah, good example of that, insurance risk mitigation. One of the biggest reasons, biggest cost for insurance claims is water damage. And, it's mainly because usually the leak is maybe behind your wall. You don't know that it's there. It might just start small. And if you found it when it first started, it might be $100 fix. But now if it breaks open a pipe, now you get tens of thousands of dollars that the insurance company has to cover and that the homeowner has to deal with in terms of inconvenience because somebody's ripping out the walls and all the insulation in their home. So those are the compelling things. It's not about the little sensor that you put in there. It's what it allows customer to do or an interested party to do and gain reduced risk.
So what are some examples that you guys have in the IoT products that you're developing today? And give us some ideas about the customer outcome that you're trying to improve. It could be a social improvement, cost improvement, risk mitigation. Anybody?
So I'm working on a capstone project with a couple of other folks in the room, actually. And as a side project, we're coming up with smart Tupperware, and the goal is to reduce food waste, but looking sort of to Nest's pivot right before they launched, they were going to go for energy waste and energy waste reduction and cost savings. And then they expanded that to just customer choice with the data that they now have access to. And so we're trying to create more information that they can take action on for items that are hidden in the back of the fridge.
Yeah, that's actually a really good one, a really good use case for a few reasons. We're actually working with appliance manufacturers that are now connecting their appliances like refrigerators to the to the internet to do various things. Look and see what, like for instance, if you've seen the Samsung refrigerator, it has a little camera that takes a look at when you need to resupply things in there. There are appliances like washing machines that you put soap in, and it can measure what you put in there and figure out when you're running out and tell Dash to just automatically send you some new stuff. So,
do you happen to know if the Samsung cameras actually do anything beyond just capture what's in there?
They just capture what's in there today.
Today.
But they do have plans to do other things. And in fact, going back to the comment I made about how your product now gets surrounded by an ecosystem of other things that could connect into it, it might be that now you want Amazon Echo so that you can tell it to do something at some point. There are people that have kitchen appliances that have weights that you can measure things for a recipe, and it'll tell you how long to keep the stove on so that it doesn't burn, things like that. So there are many ways. Even thermostats today, they tap into the utilities demand generation capability. So it knows when's the best time to use a specific appliance. So you can say, or it can tell you, if you just delay it a couple hours, it'll be cheaper for you. Those are the reasons why these things that you're learning about in the IoT, that's why we're building them. Not because it's really cool to have something connected to the network that wasn't connected before.
So regarding, just a question, what was your name again?
Melissa.
Melissa. So this is a great product because there is an operating system that's being developed right now. It's a company called Drop. Not Dropbox, it's Drop. It's the kitchen operating system. And GE is a partnership with Drop. It integrates with this smart scale. It can figure out, things that are in your refrigerator and do an if this, then that based on different information. But this is a really interesting, if my food is spoiling or if there are certain bacteria in it or if all of these different ifs, then it can alert the consumer. Or maybe you want to use up the lettuce before it starts to wilt or what have you. So there's really interesting ways to go about using your product. And you had a...
So Gavin there and I are working on essentially the trend of being there without being there. So we have this connected toy. They're essentially just two identical looking soft toys that he has a 1-year-old and he's largely at school. So he misses out on a lot of his playtime. And we became interested in how he could, while being here, play with his kids. So essentially what it does is this shakes, and when you shake this one, the other one shakes. And that's as simple as that is.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially we tested quite a bit, and we realized that his kid now, after a month or so of playing with it, understands that when this shakes, that shakes, and when he's receiving a shake, that essentially means that there is a communication, which we find quite beautiful. So that's what we.
That's amazing. Yeah, and is that data captured by the metadata captured and put up into the cloud for you to maybe determine how quickly or the responsiveness or what are you talk a little bit more about what you're thinking about as far as beyond the interaction, or maybe share more about that.
So the interaction, I think, is the key right now. To your point, we're trying to make it so that we can play together from afar.
Yep.
And ultimately, if we spin this out to be something bigger than it is right now, the goal would be to get parents to play with their kids. So we're thinking about different ways to have, incentivize me getting on the ground with my child and things. As far as like the data and the services around it, we're still kind of fuzzy. What use we can make of that? I mean, you guys have any ideas off the top of your
Well, it's certainly information about children is protected, and you have to be very careful about that. But maybe feeding into psychological studies, or how close, how quickly is a child able to learn different interactions by having that interaction with you, even though it is remotely, as opposed to you being there? A lot of dual working parents these days, they have their kids at childcare, being able to emotionally have that connection with your child. I think it might lend itself a lot to kind of the studies base, and I don't know if you have any thoughts around that.
Yeah, no, it sounds like what you're putting together is more of a virtual presence, right? A virtual presence, and it has a social aspect to it. And we've actually been working with people who are starting to get in the robotic segment, where they have social robots, where they're trying interactions as well. And one of the things you might consider is, if you haven't already, is now that you're interacting and you can see that that interaction causes some better connection, adding, because you're not physically there, your voice, which your child can understand, to that, which would give you even an additional way to connect to them. Not just by that remote, motion, right?
There's a company called iBaby. Have you heard about this? And they kind of were trying to create that overall, again, an ecosystem. Channing talked about how, you might have one product and it's connecting to the internet. But once you start adding more and more and more, and the interoperability and the ability to interconnect, maybe you start gaining information from, the baby monitor that's in the crib. Yeah. And now it's like, if you have your interaction and it shakes, and there's the baby monitor, and you can detect certain, either movement and even in the case of like autism, what a great product for autism. It's like they shake that and they're like, oh, now I have a connection, because usually autistic children have a problem with emotional connection, and they want that inanimate connection. So now you use your product and it shakes, and they're like, oh, now I have a connection, even though it's an inanimate object. So my idea is great product.
Yeah, I was curious, like in your data and your report research, when you talk about services for Internet of Things, one of the key value props for the IoT that we've seen is that you can cheaply deploy sensors, and therefore you can get data that otherwise, like sending a person out, is cost ineffective, and therefore, like the problem environmentally and like production-wise with a lot of the IoT stuff, it has to be designed to be disposable, right? Like only handle it once. It's like the Ohio rule is what one of my professors was talking about, and that if you ever had to send somebody to go fix the sensor, like
your business case is shot.
So what kind of services are you talking? Are you talking about like overlay on a platform services, not like Geek Squad services, right?
Yeah, no, it could be multiple things. Like you said, the sensors, there are sensors embedded, let's say, in the foundation of your house now. Yeah. You can't really service those, But knowing when certain ones are not working properly can give you at least an idea about whether the information it's giving you is, reliable or not. A lot of those sensors, like you say, there are a lot of sensors that are put out in industrial applications where it might be a remote oil rig. You don't want to send somebody out into the middle of the ocean in order to look at something unless it's really, really a problem. And those are absolutely the case. But you need a service that's looking to see whether that sensor is really giving you good information.
And we talked earlier about kind of the Internet of Things, Internet of Services. The way large companies and strategic companies such as Amazon are thinking about services is that they don't want to know when that thing fails. They want to know before that thing fails, and then to tell you, hey, I'm on top of this. And the services that we offer in our company is around that, kind of proactive support. So we have some use cases we'll share with you in a second. Yes.
I kind of had two questions about customer motivations. When you were talking about the smart kitchen, are you saying that you think cost savings and maybe some automated tasks is enough to motivate a customer to purchase a product? And then on the returns, did you find in your study that most of the reason is because they couldn't figure it out, or is any of it just like they didn't find it useful? Because usually my critique of IoT products that are just like, it's kind of dumb, I don't need this in my life.
Well, there's both aspects.
Yeah.
The classic case of this is dumb or it's too much work for me to maintain it is Fitbit. I don't know if you tuned into that one.
Right,
but
a lot of people put them in their drawer after 2 months.
2/3 of them are in top drawers of people's dressers.
Yeah.
So they've sold lots of them, but it isn't compelling enough. I wear one of these things, but again, I have to charge it every once in a while. I have to go look on the internet to see what it's telling me. So it tells me how many steps I did every day. Interesting, but not compelling.
With respect to the appliance, now the buying process and the desired customer outcome associated with appliance purchases, that's a very unique sales cycle. You buy an appliance once every 7 to 10 years. And when you buy it, it's kind of there. You're not going to send anybody in to change it. It didn't connect to the internet this month. And some of the, I have an app. I have the GE refrigerator app, and there's a new GE refrigerator coming out that actually combines the Keurig with your refrigerator. So you can reduce Keurig from your counter, get more counter space, and you have to put your cup in there. So, it just does one cup of coffee, but you can program it with your phone so that your cup is ready and water is coming in through the filter, and then you can load the Keurigs in so that you can set up Amazon. So anytime I have less than 3 more pods left, it'll reorder it for me. So there's a little bit of some interesting convenience there. But would you pay $6,000 for that versus $2,000 for the normal refrigerator? Again, you're looking at these two things again, right? It's 10 times more cost in the case of the light bulbs, and it's gazillions more in the case of the refrigerator. And I think we haven't got to the point with the market yet where the price is coming down to value and it's compelling enough. But I think there are a lot of big changes in the market going on, and certainly we're helping consumers overcome their objections to buying these things. We talk to consumers. We're a Z-Wave certified support partner. When a consumer says, I'm not sure which hub, which sensor, I need to buy a window door, whatever, and we guide them. So when I talk about consumers say, oh yeah, I think I need that smart window sensor, and then they buy it, and then they're like, oh, this is too hard, or I needed 100 of them, and it's too expensive, and then they return it. We're trying to educate consumers before they make that purchase so that it's the right thing for them and they understand it more. And this is in the sense of services that we're talking about that is really important for you to think about, because a lot of companies will either try to bake it into their business model later on, or they won't their sales go way down because they haven't thought about what they need to do. And we're going to talk to you a little bit about some business models in a second.
So I have a question. We see devices nowadays, like if I have an Apple laptop and an Android phone, they don't talk to each other. So taking that into the IoT system, yes, in the future you would have tons of devices, but if all of them are built on different platforms, the services would be a pain. There is no uniformity, and that's something we see in our devices nowadays.
You want to take that too? You have a good one.
Yeah, that's a good observation, because last count, I think there were 300 plus platforms, IoT platforms, that you can use for various different types of applications. And yes, it will get reduced over time, but it's because they have certain design points. Any engineer knows that, you design a product to a certain design point, it can't be good at everything, right? So it's going to be optimized for certain things. So hopefully you'll start to have some consolidation of platforms. So big players like Samsung, they're going to get into the market, they're a Goliath, as well as folks like Google, and they're going to dominate the market, and hopefully it'll drive that a little bit. But I think you're still going to have a lot of specialized things because the range of different problems that you're trying to solve are so unique. So my advice would be, if you're starting out new, try to pick one that you think is going to be a winner long term, because otherwise your product, which may stay in the market for many years, somebody's not going to be very happy when they have to throw it out because now it can't work with a bunch of other things. Yes.
I was just wondering about your guys, the way that you approach consulting IoT businesses. What is that? How do you tackle the problem? What is the engagement with that product? So imagine that we were needing to either do this ourselves or hire you guys as consultants. What would that? How do we do that?
We're going to show you some use cases in a second, so can we hold on that question and we'll, okay.
Yeah, we had a question.
I'm not sure if you are going to address this later or not. So I continue with Darsh's question. Basically, as a service provider, you are doing advice. You are advising on the IoT producers or the consumers. So what should be your vision in terms of what platform is likely to be surviving long term? Also, what should be your pick?
Well, we invested in Z-Wave. Certainly, when you talk about Android and iOS, there's a lot of competition going out there.
Probably the
Yeah.
obvious, if you have an Apple-centric product, HomeKit's a safe choice.
Yeah.
If you have an Android one, Samsung is a safe choice because Samsung owns 50% of the mobile device market. So
Yeah.
I mean, those are safe choices, but depending on what problem you're trying to solve, if it doesn't solve the problem, you may have to find a way to use that as the core and use the capabilities that you really need out of another platform and find a way to stitch them together. Unfortunately, that's probably the only answer right now. Yes.
As product designers or people who are trying to think of what next in building out new things, we get caught into the details and we are obsessed with like the customer experience that we'll be able to design. And since we are into the weeds, taking like zooming out enough to say what would be say the 10-year interaction with the with the customer might be really difficult for like us to do because or maybe it's a need, but how do we constantly toggle between that, or is it like a separate team that should be doing that, or like how do you envision?
Well, I'm going to talk about Nightingale in a little bit, which is one of our customers, and they were deep in on the enterprise. They have a noise reduction system that's usually in a lot of buildings, universities, hospitals, and they were focused on the enterprise side of things. And they moved into the consumer side. And they realized that they really weren't going to be able to understand the voice of the customer, the consumer customer, because they were so deep into the enterprise customer. And so they brought us on. We service the customer. We understand the feedback. We're taking that feedback and bringing it into the engineering group. You know what, your iOS app sucks, I'm sorry. Your Android app is a little bit better, but you're getting feedback from the customers, and we're listening to this, and we combine it up and provide feedback into the engineering group. So this might be, while I don't think it answers the entire essence of your question, thinking 10 years ahead is hard, and there are consultants and strategists and guys out there that are trying to think about where is the market going. But with respect to, if you're looking at one piece of a product and you're trying to understand how it might be utilized different, then we have services that can come in and help you tap into that consumer information and pivot. You're not going to know immediately. It's kind of the standard: go out there, try, fail fast, adjust, go do it again. Rinse, repeat. And that's kind of an important aspect of why IoT is really gaining a lot of traction, is because you can get sensors out there quickly. There are all of these platforms that can stand up an entire system for you to get your sensor out there into the market. You've got the operating system, you've got the cloud data, Amazon creates one, ThingWorks creates one, and now what do you do next? You got to listen to the customer. Maybe what you created is not what the customer's using, or maybe they're using it differently. With our Nightingale system, again, they had all these frequently asked questions that were on the internet, but nobody's going to the internet. They're looking on their phone when they want to take a look, and the way that they positioned the screens on the phone versus on the internet was completely different. And sometimes those are oversights. You haven't thought about that yet.
Well, and to answer the other piece of your question, which was this is a classic case of anybody designing any product. How do you focus on the short term and get revenue for it, while still, taking into account where it's going? And that's a judgment call based on a few things, right? How much funding do you have before you run out of money? It's how long do you think that product is going to have a useful life? And then you have to think about a strategy for moving somebody from that first product, which might be kind of more of an MVP type of product, that's very focused. And when you're first getting a product in the market, as you've probably been learning, it's very important to focus on one specific value that somebody can get immediately out of it, because that's the hook that's going to cause them to interact or use your product. But in the case of the appliance, it's going to be there 7 to 10 years. So going back to that type of situation, what manufacturers are doing now is they're starting out knowing that they need diagnostics, right? So maybe it isn't about talking to your appliance. That's the connected part of it. Maybe it's about having remote diagnostics so that I know ahead of time that the belt's going to break on my dryer. So when I'm in a rush to get my clothes dried someday and it doesn't work, I'll be ahead of that. I would have ordered that already. Somebody would have come on site. They could even automatically schedule that and get that fixed. So yeah, there is definitely a tension between that short-term thinking and the long-term thinking.
All right, just a couple of metrics here, and just reinforces what we've been talking about is, 82% of customers stop doing business when they have a bad experience. This is higher than the other metric that we found in the US. Ovum is a consulting company that's based in Europe, so maybe Europeans have a more, averse to.
Tougher on you.
Yeah, tougher on you when you're bad. So the customer effect. Businesses underestimate the level of customer involvement in solving an issue. It's really important to have omni-channels out there. When, where, and how is the customer going to come to? Is it with Twitter, Facebook, social media, email, chat, and then to make it easy for them to get issue resolution. Our firm, shameless plug here, we go across all of the aspects. Wherever, however, whenever a customer is trying to interact with you as a company, we can provide that omni-channel support.
The important data point, if you haven't picked it out already, is that customers think they have to contact you, who manufactures the product 6 times in order to get something resolved. But most of the people that resolve the problems think it only takes 1 or 2. So there's some disconnect there.
Another metric regarding mobile apps. Channing, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about this one, because I know you were the developer of our mobile app support.
Yeah, mobile is really important. You've already seen that because the mobile device is pretty much the control device for almost every Internet of Things device. So the question is, why not leverage the fact that you have that for providing support as well? And so one of the things we did for some of our customers is we developed a mobile SDK, a software development kit, that allows customers to embed in their mobile app the ability to get somebody on a voice call or a chat, and also leverage the camera that's in every single phone, so that if you're having a problem, you want to show someone exactly what your problem is. You don't have to describe it to them. You can just point your camera at it and they can see what you're seeing. Okay, so things like that. Those are things thinking out of the box about how you interact with your customer so that their experience with your product is better.
Some information about what contact centers or support centers are doing, what they're investing in. Now, a lot of people have a negatively perceived value about calling somebody, a customer or a company up on the phone. And you hear all of these awful recordings of Comcast and being transferred to, 6 to 7 times. And there's a name for companies that do that. It's business process outsource. You outsource the process to companies, and they've been predominantly successful because they drive the price way down. They have lower value employees, or lower cost employees that are responding to these customer issues. What we're finding in the IoT market is you need to have higher experienced technicians that are responding to questions to consumers, and they need to be able to have depth and breadth across all the protocols, all the components, whether it's a smart home, smart car, industrial IoT, farm, agricultural IoT. They have to have awareness, and they can't follow a script. I've listened to recordings where the customer is asking a question and the person on the other end is simply reading the same statement over and over again from a script. In order for you to address this higher customer value and customer experience, you have to invest in the technological support in order to scale your company or product up and give that level of expertise. So I know this is kind of hard to read, but the call centers that are involved in the types of services and support that we do at PlumChoice are investing in these kind of virtual queues, live chats. And as a small startup and an IoT innovator, these are expensive to get them up and running. You're not thinking about creating a support organization. Well, we have models that can help you to do kind of a slow growth, small usage until you get into that level of scale where you're going to have lots of calls coming in.
Yeah, one of the biggest things that we found for people coming out with a new product, more from the standpoint of a startup than an established company. But even in established companies, because of a lot of established companies are starting up their connected home products in internal incubators, very much like you have in external ones, is that they start by supporting it with the people who developed it. Okay? So, and the engineers are passionate about getting that direct customer feedback. Most of you know what happens to that, right? As you try to scale your business, that doesn't scale very well. And also, the engineers get tired of being asked the same questions over and over. So, planning that process of when do you let go and working with somebody who can still give you the quality of feedback that the engineers need in order to improve the product while they still take the calls is that's a challenge. Yep.
Reading between the lines of that one, is that saying that customer support cost for IoT products are higher than your average for other products because of the complex nature?
It can be, but more important than that message is that you have to find different ways to provide support that mitigate that, right? So all the way from self-help to sending somebody on site. There's a whole range of things you can do, and you have to find the right mix because your product is different than her product.
Mm-hmm. All right, and this is another metric that we found out there from Forrester that talks about what avenues consumers prefer to use to reach out to you as the IoT development company. And so it's kind of hard to read some of them here. But
First one is phone, 79%. It's amazing. We keep finding that everybody says, oh, everybody wants to help themselves. To a certain point, it's nice to have easy ways to do things that are pretty simple to do. You get above a certain complexity, and now they want some interaction with a person.
Yeah. So, and then the 2% one on there is
social media
and cameras and video. A lot of the interesting things about the smart home is the number one biggest question that we get is actually, will it work for me? Which product should I buy? And a lot of times using the video camera to kind of understand where the consumer is going to be placing these things, because in the home you've got Wi-Fi extenders and you're putting certain things like moisture sensors and water detection way in the bowels of your basement or up in the attic, and you don't have Wi-Fi at those places. So the interesting thing about Z-Wave is there are mesh networks where as you add more components onto the network, it extends your network. So there's something to think about when you're putting that product in the home. And we had a company that we worked with that did a baby monitor, and they didn't have a strong enough Wi-Fi signal detection. So the monitor was not on all the time. So you have to think about these kinds of things and the way the consumer is going to using it. So video camera, we have an SDK that allows you to tap into the video camera so that when the customer support organization is trying to either help a consumer buy something or respond to an issue, they can use the camera to see where the sensors are all set up inside the home. We have a lot of studies or copies of our study here. The You're the Device. We certainly encourage you to come up and take versions of these, and we'll answer any questions about this. But there's a lot of key insights here, and we've kind of littered some of those insights throughout the presentation today. And what we wanted to do next is give you some specific use cases of what we offer and how we do it. So if you've ever called AT&T or Verizon today and you have broadband service from them and you said, hey, I need help either connecting my printer, my router, if you've ever called them, you're speaking to a PlumChoice employee. So we have white label services. We answer the phone as a Verizon employee, as an AT&T employee, and then we help guide the consumer for whatever question they might have inside the home. Can't connect my refrigerator, I can't connect my printer. So the Verizon and AT&T are one of our top 2 premier clients, and I just wanted to show you a little bit of some of the web pages that we have here on the links. Let's see.
Is that for a particular account? Like I call Verizon, I'm sure I hit like their tier 1 like general routing person first, right?
Yeah, they have different levels. Your standard billing questions is that's not us. Your standard, am I connected to the internet, isn't us. We're, after you get past their support demarcation line, then it's us. It's more difficult stuff. Like they think it's their connection because this doesn't work, or they actually have a virus which is preventing it from working. Those are things that we take care of.
So there's one person who is only assigned to Verizon, or as an employee they'd be doing?
Verizon happens to be a big enough program so that we have a dedicated team that's only Verizon. Yeah. Otherwise, so you starting up as a startup for a bunch of our IoT customers, they have a more general queue, and then there's a baseline of general skills. Because there's such a broad range of things we could be doing, we train in specific products that we're supporting for a smaller number of people.
Right. So this is the website for Verizon. Certainly if you go on that website and request support, or if you call in or route it into us, this is the type, it's Tech Support Pro, and it's responding to devices in the home. We've been working with Verizon for well over 10 years, and we started, we'll talk a little bit about the use case in a second, but we've gone on to, revision 2 of their smart home support. This is the AT&T Tech Support Pro. This is a business service. So when you call, as a business, if you're providing, getting broadband, phone, unified communications from AT&T, then we provide that service. Another web page I wanted to show you is the Nightingale. It's the smart home sleep system, the first ever smart home sleep system. It creates a blanket over your room to ensure that you either compress the noise or expand the noise, depending if you're wanting to go to bed or you're having a party. Z-Wave, here's the web page. If you call in, chat, email, you're talking to a PlumChoice employee. HP Smart Friend. These are all of the HP devices in your home. It could be printer, computer, tablets, and as you can see, they actually charge you for it. There's a pricing. We'll talk a little bit about pricing in a second. PC Richard & Son. They are an Eastern-based electronics company. TVs, computers, smart appliances. We provide the premium tech support there. Samsung, another company. We provide the support for their smart products and all their consumer electronics. So these are just a few examples of the types of services that we provide today. And I wanted to kind of give you a real live use cases before we talked a little bit about how we go about doing this. So those are the web pages. So PlumChoice provides services, not just when the consumer buys that service, not when they're installing it, not just when something breaks, but throughout the entire life cycle. We can help a consumer buy a product in the home, or an IoT product. We can help them when they're downloading the app, installing and integrating. Your leak detection sensor requires a plumber to come into the home. So we work with outsourced companies that go to the home and install the components in the home, and then we call them up and say, all right, let me help you configure this. So it's a remote support, but it starts off with a physical on-site installation. Any training on usage, monitoring alerts, proactively determining if there's something happening and we want to fix the belt on your dryer before it actually starts to break. We do proactive. And then advocating and cross-selling and upselling. Again, the idea here is you have a long-term relationship with the consumer and you want to engage with them over the life of that, not just a one and done, they buy it and they're gone. Yes?
So I know there's like a big push just in general to be more outward reaching for a lot of these like call center type things. Traditionally, they just receive calls and get help, but in order to create this long-term relationship, they're reaching. As you guys have opportunities with like prognostics or diagnostic type stuff, as you receiving data, how do you reach? Just making phone calls or sending? How do calls go out of your call centers?
Out. Most of our outbound calls are for what we call concierge level support. So somebody has a product that's $500 that really they want to give the customer a specialized experience so that from the time they buy it, they have hand-holding help to do that. We may make an outbound call and say, thank you, sir, you've just purchased one of our expensive, products. We'd like to help you make sure that you can get it working, et cetera, and then provide that support. That's one way. Onboarding, if the product's a little bit more difficult and you expect that the customer is going to have problems or probably doesn't want to deal with it. We have customers whose profile is 1% of the top 1%. Price is no object. They don't want any problems when they buy it. So you would do an outbound touch to them, or multiple ones if needed, to make sure that they're happy.
I'm interested in the channels there.
Yeah.
You're making phone calls?
Yeah, you can make phone calls. You can send emails. You don't get much response to that. Chat's almost impossible because they have to be online at any time. So phone is usually still the best way to reach them. In fact, what has to happen is you have to set expectations. If you're selling a product, you have to say, someone's going to reach out to you and help you get this done. So they're expecting the call. Otherwise, you get so many calls every day that if it's something that you don't recognize, you probably ignore it. Yes?
How about the in-app engagements for smart refills or smart servicing when they sense that something's going wrong?
Yeah, what about that?
Yeah, is that something that you focus on, or is it still kind of behind in terms of?
We don't focus on it. People like Amazon do, and we help manufacturers integrate that capability and support that capability working with their products.
Do you see that as a trend moving forward? That people are trying to automate as much as possible, and that's working? Because there's a lot of kind of a pendulum swing between speaking with real people and getting automated support that's really smart, and it is a balancing act. So where do you think we are in terms of that?
Yeah, that's interesting because you're absolutely right. There's these things that people put out there and they think, oh, this would be a great idea. And then they find it falls over like a lead balloon, But that's part of the learning process. You have to try things, and that's why data is so important. You can see what the response is. Do they shut that feature off? That can tell you something about the value of that feature. How do they use it? When do they use it? Things like that. So I think the data part is very important in getting that feedback and having that as you go through the introduction of the product through different stages of maturity. I think it's really important to continue to take those checkpoints. You had a question?
Yeah, I wanted just to add to that. How is PlumChoice preparing for the automated future? Like right now, it's not so good that it can replace humans, but maybe near future it might be then. So
yeah, that's a good question. I think the short answer is humans won't be replaced anytime in the future. But for certain functions that humans don't want to really deal with, or that can be dealt with pretty reliably. Reliably is a really important word. Reliably means it's done in the way that the consumer expects it to be done. So it may not be done exactly the same way for you as it is for her and for me, but it has to be done in the way we expect it to be done. And another question?
So I want to make sure I've kind of got a good understanding of what you all offer. We're designing IoT products and thinking about startups. Should we be thinking of you as like a microservice for service in the same way that Braintree or Twilio come in for SMS or payments?
Yeah.
You're the plugin with the SDK that would make customer service easy to click on, and if we want to full on, you could outsource.
Yeah. You could. The way you should think about it as an option for you, depending on where in your decision-making point you are in terms of when you decide maybe support isn't your core competency, and you really do want to scale it. If you're selling a few of them, maybe you don't. But if you see a ramp going to thousands and millions of them, most likely you probably don't want to be in the business of doing support.
Yeah. So we've had a couple of startups as they got through their Series B of funding, and again wanted to scale into that support. They enlisted our services. And I just want to comment a little bit about your question regarding, the pendulum swinging between the. I've seen it go both ways. It's almost like it's still one of those things that's going like this a little bit, and I'm sure it's going to land somewhere in the middle. But we've seen that the ability to automate support is just not getting us enough It's not good enough. It's not 80% of the market out there. Certainly there's the millennials, which you all are part of, where automated the chatbot or some kind of way to kind of respond proactively is something that's really important. And I love that as well. It makes my life easy and convenient. The problem is there's so many different demographic groups out there that are, I'm hopeful that your product doesn't just service, one demographic. If you really want to make it out there, or maybe there's some, social good that's going to need to, product that needs to go out to a wide breadth and depth of companies and countries. Countries you're not quite sure how they're going to need that level of support. And so we found that there is a level of manual and customized support that's needed in order to get you over the hump. And we're just not to the mass majority adoption on the IoT yet. There's a lot of products out there, and some of them are really making a big splash. But for a lot of the companies that we've seen, it's not yet to mass majority. And in order you got to help the consumer overcome their objection to buying the product and to getting into the market before you get to that mass majority.
That first success is very important. When somebody buys it and they've spent $49.99 instead of $5.99, you've got to get them to that first point where they said, "Oh, that's why I bought it, because now I can do this." And if they can't get to that point, they either return it or it sits in the top drawer.
All right, so now we're going to talk about use cases, and I'm going to have you go first to talk about the first two use cases that we have.
Okay. So in 2011, this was not before you were born, but it's a little while ago. They started with a pioneering project in home monitoring and control way before all the stuff you've seen in the last few years. And we pioneered it with them, so we learned a lot of lessons. They put out all the things that you see today: security, cameras, lighting, door locks, thermostats, and then they had a gateway that they're all connected to. And then they charged $10 a month service fee for supporting it. And this is something that you will probably run into as you start to think about products. Do I charge a fee? Is there enough of value so that a customer feels that a fee is necessary? Or do I have to build it into the product so your product now becomes this service? So those are things that you have to think about. And what we found over time in the last 5 years in a lot of these smart home installations is that for security, there's a certain tolerance of people who buy ADT, for instance. They pay $20 to $50 a month for a security service because they have a monitoring piece that calls the police when there's a critical alert. But that's only 20 to 25% of the people that feel they want to pay for it. People want to be able to do most of it themselves and only pick, the critical places where they want to pay for specific value. And those are the things to think about as you put together your solution. Okay? They started with a packaged solution. Let's make it easy for the customer. We'll give them exactly what they need. Good idea, but immediately ran into a brick wall. Let's say you buy their starter package, and it has 3 sensors for security for windows and doors. But you've got 4 windows and 5 doors. What do? I could buy more sensors, but which ones? And will it affect the installation of it? And how do I know that? So we actually had to provide that level of consultation service in the middle of providing technical support. So we would say, they would tell us that we're installing it, we want to install it in all our windows. We only got 3 sensors. What do we do? Oh, we'll help you buy it. So we help them actually make the transaction, buy the right ones, so that we're not going to get another call because they're not happy with it. Okay? The other thing we found is there were multiple different types of connectivity involved. There was Wi-Fi for the hub itself and for security cameras. They were Wi-Fi based. Z-Wave for a lot of the security based sensors. Zigbee for very simple things like little tiny window sensors. So having to know all those different things and how to make them all work together was a challenge. So we're seeing in the next generation where people are focusing on a smaller number of them. In fact, Wi-Fi, I'm sure most of you think it's simple because you use it every day, but most of the general public has a lot of trouble figuring out how to connect things to Wi-Fi. So what's happened in next generation smart home products, if you haven't run across this already, you probably will. They use Bluetooth to bootstrap the Wi-Fi connection, because Bluetooth is easy. Everybody knows how to connect a Bluetooth device. You just find it and you tell it to connect. And so once that connection is made, they use that to actually make the connection to the Wi-Fi. So those are things that were learned in that. We're now working with Verizon on the next generation. It's a very different approach. And unfortunately, I can't share it with you because they haven't released it yet, but they learned a lot from doing it this way. Savant Systems. This was a very interesting one. They essentially built their business on luxury home automation. The 1%, the top 1% of the 1%. If you don't own a castle, a yacht, or something else like that, you weren't qualified to do that because the starting point was $5,000 for entry point. Was that? But again, the Tom Brady's of the world, the people who have nothing but money would buy these things, and they actually wouldn't manage it themselves.
You guys know Tom Brady?
Yeah. Yeah, we're from Boston, so we don't Tom Brady. And for those who are from Pittsburgh, probably don't like Tom Brady. So anyway, so they made a transition because they realized top 1% of 1% is a very small statement. You use them up pretty quickly. And also with the trend towards more do-it-yourself types of products, they wanted to reach a much broader market. So they went down market to try to reach a premium home consumer profile with an entry price 10 times less than the original price. And these are things you'll have to think about when you start out in that one place where your MVP is, and it's somewhat successful. How do you make it more successful? How do you make it, more appealing to a broader audience? What things do you have to consider? And for the premium luxury, they had people dedicated that they hired that worked for them to handle it because they could afford to do that. But when you get to a $500 device, you don't have that luxury. You have to find a different way to do it. And they decided to outsource it, and they outsourced it to us. They actually got a separate equity investment in order to go after this consumer market because it was so different from their market. What they found is that consumer do-it-yourself is a heck of a lot more complicated, much more complicated. In a custom market, you can select all the different things that you know work together. And you put a truck out there, and you have somebody who knows all that stuff, put it together, install it in there, and they'll watch it because you're paying them a few $100 a month to make sure it still works. If you got a $500 product, if you make somebody pay $500 for all that stuff, you're going to rethink whether they really want it or not. Okay? So that's kind of something to think about there, right? Any questions? Yes.
I would imagine that there's a high learning curve associated with pricing and customer tiering. So if you make an assumption, for example, you want to make it scalable, and so you say, I want it to be DIY, and it's going to be so easy to install, and this is the out-of-box experience that I imagine, and then that doesn't happen. What have you seen? How can people recover from that poor first booby?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question because a lot of people do make that mistake. There are so many people I have run across that say to me, my product is so easy, we're not going to need any support.
Right.
We know
I'm
that
writing
one
down
is.
the note of, do we have installation experience and offer support? In parentheses, no, the goal is to scale, but that's a wish, not a fact, right?
What?
Where I wish that it was so easy that we
Yes.
don't need to offer support, because
Yes.
I know that as a startup we wouldn't have that.
Yeah, and what typically happens, especially with a startup, is they think it's really easy because, there's a group of very passionate people who really believe in their concept, et cetera, and they haven't put it in the market and understand the different profiles of people that will be using it. That's where you run into the problem. And what a lot of them do in the interim is they hire people like PlumChoice to help them, get through that period, because otherwise nobody's going to adopt it, if they can't get past that point.
And it's really tough to think about your social media strategy as well, because once you start getting complaints on your social media feeds, it's very hard to get rid of those. And all of a sudden, that's your brand. So I encourage you to think very strongly about when you're going to go out there with a social media presence, what types of customers are, it might be nice, everyone loves it, like, share, and then, wait a second, this is not working for me, and then that's there forever. So unless you have like the quick response, someone in your support team says, we're getting on to it, Mr. We work with another company where they take their social media feedback and they say, I want to interact with you one-on-one through email or through the phone. They take it off. And the reality is you're going to make some mistakes. You're starting out. There are going to be things that you have to figure out, and you just don't need to publicize it to everybody. You might strategize on how you put that on in your blog. Hey, we learned this thing, and you want to share, but you got to figure out how do we learn from this and not be in kind of this fire drill of response and more of a kind of a managed expectation. Maybe you did design it wrong, and maybe the app does suck. But let's figure out how we're going to, you can't do everything all at once. So we're going to work on this activity first, and we're going to share it with our audience on how we're updating it with this blog. And then it's not it's not being done on the customer's Twitter time, but it's done on your strategic time, because it might not be the most important thing for you in your overall, use of resources.
Yeah, and I think what Noelani's talking about is this balance between idealism, right, and reality. And there has to be the right balance for you to be successful.
So the other thing that we did was we actually partnered with an energy company, SRP. And when you think of energy companies, they give you energy. You pay their bill once a month. You expect them to be on all the time, And so what they did was they capitalized on this trusting relationship. Energy companies are also geo-focused, so they don't do a lot of competition, across the U.S. on a national basis. And SRP is based in Arizona, and they wanted to go into the home automation, security and control. So they wanted to package up a product, a water sensor, thermostat. What was the third thing? Moisture. Oh no, what was it?
Water detection. It was water shutoff valve.
Water shutoff valve. Which is it's kind of like, wow, an energy company is giving me all of these components. And they enlisted the support of PlumChoice to not only be that triage point to send the installer to the home, because you can't set up a water detection and a thermostat and all these other components without getting a certified installer to the site, a plumber or an electrician. So we facilitated the scheduling of someone on site, and they actually packaged this service in the overall price of the. It's not a separate cost for you to get this service. They increased the overall price of the equipment, the installation, and the service all into one price. And it was a pilot. So as you can see here, one of the things that we did was we started off with this internal beta in Q3 and Q4 of last year, and then we're working to the second version. Energy companies are notoriously conservative, so they want to really try things out before they actually and they're moving into a new market, right? Energy companies are going into home automation, so they want to make sure that they've got the right package and support for their consumer base, and they're taking a lot of feedback from the market. How are consumers using it? We found that customers called us 7.1 times. Every customer out there called us 7.1 times during the course of this 6-month period. They had questions about their garage door wasn't working, their home, water sensor wasn't working, their security platform wasn't working, their video monitors weren't working correctly. So that's quite a lot of times. It's once per month. How many times do you call your energy provider once a month? So it completely changed the way that they were working with the relationship that they had with the consumers. Any questions?
Yeah, I'd like to comment. What you might ask, I don't know if anybody has in their mind, you might ask, why is a utility company getting into this business when they really don't know it? A couple reasons. One, they have a relationship with their customer that's probably long term, because you aren't going to move to another utility in that area because they don't have a physical connection into your home. So they have that relationship already. Now, what is driving them to get into this business? Their business is changing. And energy business is really changing for a lot of reasons. People are saving more energy, so they're not selling as much. And then the more advanced of us who have solar energy might be putting energy back into the grid. So that's further eroding their revenue stream. So how do they stay relevant to their customers? And then there's a lot of different supply, energy supply capabilities where other people use their pipes to your home to deliver cheaper energy than they could do it. You may have seen that already. If you pay a bill in your house, I just recently had a change, and the person supplying the energy was different than the person billing me. So there's a lot of that going on, and that's why they're getting into this. The thought is we'll leverage the relationship with another capability that our subscribers want, and we'll just add it to their bill. And so that'll kind of level off the decline in their in the energy.
So the last use case that we wanted to talk about was this Nightingale smart sleep system. This was a startup. They had been in the commercial space, and they were moving into the consumer space. And they needed our help in order to take on information about the voice of the customer, respond to those requests, chat, email, social media. And I think one of the biggest learnings that we had that we're seeing continually over and over again is moving from that enterprise space into the consumer space and trying to address what the consumer relationship is. So I don't know, are most of you in kind of the smart home consumer space? Or are you looking to build a product for enterprise or a smart office or a smart business? Is anybody enterprise? No? Okay. Kind of. What's your product?
So I'm doing increasing the presence of students in classrooms using remote headsets that are connected. So distance learning situations, you get your own headset and you are now connected to the teacher. So the gestures that you do in the class can relay to the teacher that you have a question or a thing or you want to comment or something.
Right. Yeah. And so your customer is going to be universities.
Yeah, universities, schools, whoever needs it.
Got it. And interesting because you might find that there's some capabilities in the product that you're offering similar to what Nightingale found that is interesting to the consumer base. And you can go out through multiple channels. And obviously the difference in supporting universities versus supporting the mass consumer market is very different.
A classic example of that transition are, you look at communications. Skype today we take for granted, right? But it used to only be available to large enterprises because you could spend lots of money to communicate remotely.
And with the Nightingale product, the way that they offered, the business model around this was that they did not charge the consumer for the services. They felt that that was something that was going to enable them to keep the consumer with their product and not return it. So that there wasn't any incremental service cost the way that there was, on the Verizon did Savant charge extra? No. Yeah, that was included also. So these are actually going to be available in Brookstone starting next month. If anybody needs a smart sleep system, it blankets the room to based on your different sleep habits and uses different noise cancellation and reduction. So for those business people in the room, how do you make money off of services, right? The idea here is not just I'm going to grow and I'm going to scale and I can't handle it. That's a good problem to have, right? If you're growing and you've got that hockey stick ramp up, then obviously PlumChoice can help you by supplementing your engineering team that's answering the call with our engineers that can answer the call. But we've got a bunch of different ways that we want to present to you about how you can use services to make money off of IoT products. Hand it over to you.
Right, yeah.
Over here.
Business models all the time. You have to figure out how to make it work for not only our partner, but for consumers as well. So, you know, what we talked about wanting to accelerate a customer's purchase decisions, because at the end of the day, you're not going to have a customer unless they're aware of the product and they understand the value propositions to it. So we provide services that are typically paid by the partner because they're the one who wants to drive that usage and the purchases. And you know, they might do it on a per call basis. And these are things to consider when you put a model together, because as I understand from Dara, that may be one of the things that you actually deal with in terms of learning about the IoT is business models and pricing. Devices that another market need we already talked about is devices that need to be installed and used, otherwise people will return them. And again, you could either have the partner could pay for a part of it, they could subsidize it. You could consider, if you have the right use case, seeing how a customer might pay for it. And it really, you have to do a lot of thinking about what is the use case, what is the value proposition, why would a customer versus a partner pay. Okay, but there are various different models you can use. You can have them pay per call, per installation. We found in the consumer market, most people want a more predictable cost. So, you know, any way that you can create a model that gives a predictable cost and not a variable one is probably good.
And investors like that type of model, right? Because then, you know, there's a reliability there, there's less risk, and they know that it's associated with every either product or customer that you bring onto your platform.
Yeah, and I won't go through all of these, but again, you know, at the end, the last one has to do with a monthly subscription, typically paid for by the customer. You have to really find a compelling value proposition for that to be important to them. You know, outside of that, you know, it's just very difficult because they just bought your expensive IoT product, and it's like, you want me to pay more? You know, you just dipped into my pocket, now you're sticking your hand further into it, right?
And you know, on the consumer electronics, on the retail side, you might find the price point, you know, price to value is about $1,000 for the product package. You know, we'll pretty much enable you, if there's a strong service need, to charge a customer between $5 and $10 a month, you know, for an annual subscription, if that consumer electronics really has a strong need in order to enable the customer to get over the hump of understanding all the features of the product. On the smart sleep system, you know, they're looking at, you know, $2 to $4 throughout the life of the product, you know, and that's really, you know, because there's a low redemption, low call-in associated with the product, but really consumers are mostly asking about connectivity. And once you get connected once, you know, then it's kind of done. But if you get a huge volume of calls, because as I said, they went out to Brookstone and they're also on Amazon, it's hard to handle that huge influx of customer calls. So, you know, that's a cost center for the company, but it certainly is something that mitigates, you know, and ensures that they have a strong customer brand and customer loyalty and customer relationship.
Questions so far? Right, so this pricing model gives you a more visual look at how you might think about pricing services. You know, if a customer has to get a service when they've really got a problem and they got to fix it, it's going to be expensive because they're going to use it. You know, they're absolutely going to use it because they had the problem. The better way to do it is find a way to attach it at the point of sale when you're selling the product, because it's more like an insurance policy. In general, the customer is not going to use a whole lot of it, except maybe just to get started. And then on an ongoing basis, for them, it's peace of mind that I run into a problem, I'm covered, okay? And then you can see at the very end, if you bundle it with every single product you send out there, it'll be a lot cheaper on a per unit basis, and you'll have a predictable cost that you can model in your pricing model.
The point here is that if a customer is calling into you at that point of pain and says, I need help now, and then you're like, oh, emergency, someone's got to help me now. That's really expensive. It's hard to plan, it's hard to adjust. Whereas if you just build it into your long-term model, that has a better, consistent, more reliable way to plan and support. That's really the key message here is, an immediate emergency point of pain. It's going to be a high demand on your organization. Like, oh, we didn't expect to get this type of question. Now what do we do? Let me find that right person, as opposed to proactively planning and including it into your long-term business model. So some key takeaways for today is that I think we wanted to make sure that we shared with you, that the Internet of Things is really turning into long-term customer Internet of Services. You need to think about your user experience, the user interface. How do you drive awareness and adoption of your product? How can you use services to do that by getting the consumers over the hump if they're having challenges? How do you know what those challenges are? Getting that voice of the customer fed back into your engineering organization. Thinking about device as a service. If you want to continue to have, an upgraded product out there and you have a subscription service, that's a really interesting model. Obviously, a lot of IoT products are moving towards that type of business model. Having a single point of technical support. If you have multiple different support organizations and it's kind of a disjointed service interaction, to us, we see value in having that single point of technical contact. Omni-channel, when the customer wants, how they want it, give them that service in any way that they want with multiple touch points if possible. Different business models, obviously bundling the service into the overall pricing of the product, or having a subscription service for the consumer to pay if you have a strong enough value and a need for that. Understanding your life cycle costs. When is the consumer going to be engaged? Multiple times, one time? How long is your product going to be out there in the market? These are all important factors to think about. And then thinking about the ecosystem. Overall, where is your product in the overall ecosystem? The customer, is it in the kitchen? Is it in the baby's bedroom? Is it in the classroom? What other things are going on there, and how can you add on some incremental service value to your product? And then finally, we didn't spend a lot of time on this, and we could probably spend a whole day on the data and the insights and the intelligence that are associated with your customer feedback, but it's really important for you to think about this. And as a service organization, we are hearing that constantly, and we have data warehouse components that pull that information into our back office and send intelligence information back to the IoT company. So thank you for your time. Again, I welcome you to come up and pick up a report that we did on the smart home. We've got a bunch of tchotchke here, and I will say we are also looking for interns. So if you're coming to Boston this summer, we're about an hour north of Boston in Lowell, and we have worked with the Carnegie Mellon in a couple of different ways. And if you're interested in figuring out how to provide support services in the IoT market, we'd take a business card and definitely reach out, and we'd love to talk to you.
We have a pretty long history of working with people who are just getting into the field, all the way from trade schools to universities, local universities, where they're specializing in technology and IT type of support. We actually put a call center in one of the schools in Boston, so that because some of the students weren't old enough to drive. And, it's for convenience. So they didn't have to go that far in order to just work a few hours. So we have a long history of doing that. I did part of that as one of my roles. I've been mainly in product during my time at PlumChoice, but I did spend 2 years on the technology side working on building what we call an innovation lab, which we actually staffed with people who are more familiar with some of the more current technologies.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Are there any final questions for Noelani or Channing? I'm just going to run in and cancel recording.
Okay.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys are doing some really cool stuff. So yes.
Does any startup work with
you guys? Because like it seems like you guys provide lots of service for big companies, but what about the small business?